Already. Sounds like a plan. Well, yeah, that kind of preempted what I was about to say. We are going to be recording this tonight, as we do have a few members that aren't able to join us and would just like to watch after the fact, which is fantastic. So just bear with me as I share my screen here for a second, as we do have a presentation to show. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here and are engaging and letting us know your names or pronouns, where you're from. Let me find my excellent. Okay. All right, folks. Here we go. And hopefully everyone is able to share, to see. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. Excellent. Okay. Well, here's this is our Mo Legislative 2025 wrap up. We are doing this in partnership with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. Very unfortunately, a few just unforeseen issues came up. So we are not able to be joined by an MCE representative this evening, but we are all here today, and we're just going to be chatting a little bit about how the session went. And we are very lucky this evening. We're joined by a very special guest, Senator Tracy McCreery, who's already on the call. So we'll be hearing from her in a few moments. But to kick it off, here is our general agenda. So just welcoming folks in, as we kind of already started doing. And we have that little question that we have, that will be the next slide. We'll do a general overview of the sessions. So bills, what special session looked like, some trends that we're seeing, legislative reflections. So that will be a time when the senator can share what her inside thoughts are. And then looking ahead, kind of getting into how to make an impact. And then we will end with some parting thoughts. But to start, I kind of want to go over some chapter norms here, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And for those that are looking, if you could pick a few that maybe speak to you, if you want to read it out loud for us, that'd be great. There's one that I do want to go over that's not as straightforward, the try it on. So here with the Sierra Club, we have a bunch of different groups and spaces where Sierra Club members can come together and chat with like-minded folks. So much like tonight, this is a presentation that's very much a try it on. So thank you so much for joining with us tonight to try this on. So if anyone wants to come off mute or say in the chat if there's a certain norm that really speaks to them, that would be fantastic. But if not, you can also just share in the chat as well.
I'll come off mute and say something. Hi, folks. I'm Ashton Rawling, staff member with the Sierra Club. One that I really like to uplift, especially when talking about legislation and policy, is minimizing the use of jargon. Explain the terms when you speak. I feel like there's so many acronyms and so much insider baseball terms, especially in this realm of activism. So let's try to minimize some jargon.
That is fantastic, Ashton. Thank you. I tried my best to minimize that jargon in the slides, but thank you so much for highlighting that one. That's a very important one.
Another one that's important while we're talking about politics, especially, is thinking about your own personal power and privilege. So not making assumptions on why other people are doing things the way that they are. Like, I see a lot of like, why aren't young people like out voting? Or why isn't this group doing this? Or why doesn't that get? So we want to be thoughtful about our own space in the world and the privileges that allow us to do the things that we can do, and take the stances that we're able to take. And I think that's really important when we're having these discussions, is to just come into this with an open mind and open heart, and assume that folks are generally trying their best. There are bad actors, but generally people are trying.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Gretchen and Ashton. For the sake of time, I'll go ahead and I'll move on. And this is my the welcome / insert slide, so which we kind of already ventured into. But for those that are joining us now, please feel free to submit your answers in the chat, your name, what pronouns you use, what part of Mo you're calling in from, and also if you're all interested, please answer this question: what is your favorite way to be politically involved? A few answers were like knocking on doors. Yours can even be voting, calling your representatives, etc. I don't think I've had a chance to even introduce myself. I don't know. I'm relatively new to the chapter. My name is Karen Neiswanger. I'm going to be the Mid-Mo organizer. I'm calling in from Kansas City, however, but my move to Mid-Mo is imminent. And then I have a few colleagues joining me as well. Gretchen and Ashton, I'll let you quickly introduce yourself if you'd like to.
Sure thing. My name is Gretchen. I am the Missouri chapter director. My pronouns are she and hers. I oversee all the work that the Sierra Club does here in Missouri, and I feel very lucky to work with our staff, interns, and local volunteers to help make what they want to do possible. I am living in St. Louis now, but I've lived all over the state, and I'm glad to be here. And I was one of our main lobbyists this year, so excited to share what I've learned.
I'm Ashton Rawling, she, her, they, them pronouns. I'm our chapter coordinator, which means I do a lot of behind the scenes support in terms of getting emails out, updating our website, updating our data list, what have you. Happy to be here. I also want to shout out we have our St. Louis organizer, Mahala Pruitt Pittman, on the call, and our chapter intern practicum student, Charlene Hansen, on the call as well. Love y'all. If y'all want to introduce yourselves as well.
All right. Well, I'm maybe not. I'll go ahead and I will move on. But we'll get into the good stuff here. We had some good bills passed this year. I know session didn't end the way that we all well, very unexpectedly. But we did have some good news here. So House Bill 516 is the first bill that I want to highlight. So that removes the cap of the hazardous waste fund. It also just modifies appropriations and just some criteria for investigations. So the fund was originally capped at $150,000 for investigations, but this bill actually removes that cap, and it allows for donations, bequests, gifts without limitation. That said, this money is only used for investigations, not necessarily for cleanup. But I think that this bill also allows for folks for investigations to reach out to federal folks and request that money back, since back in the day this was a federal issue. Moving on to Senate Bill 82. So that is a ban on exporting water outside of the state. So this really just helps protect our most valuable resource. So this, like it says, it bans that export, but permits can be issued by the Department of Natural Resources, DNR, and permit holders will be required to report their usage, which all of that will be publicly available. So good for transparency. Another bill, a great one that passed, Senate Bill 105. So this is a huge win for our native ecosystems. This bill bans the sale of certain invasive plant species. And nurseries will no longer be able to sell these certain species. I know it includes all types of Japanese honeysuckle and other ones that I can't really pronounce. But as by affidavit requirement, they will not be able to sell these types of plants. So this bill has the potential to greatly decrease the amount of invasive plants that are present in our ecosystem. So that is a big win. These are the biggest ones that we focused on, and what we consider to be our biggest wins this year. Moving on to some of the bad news. So key bills that passed that are less than what we wanted. I'll pass it off to Gretchen for Senate Bill 4.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 4, and probably a little bit more than we would with other things, because I just want to share what amazing work folks did. So Senate Bill 4 is it's an omnibus utility bill. So omnibus means it's a bunch of provisions all stacked together in one bill, but they all relate to the same thing. And so this was utilities. And it involved a lot of issues that we have seen in the legislature year after year. They sort of come up. Sometimes we call them zombie bills because they just won't die, right? And some of these things are things that we've been fighting for 30 years or longer. So some of the provisions in this bill included things like So folks may be familiar with CWIP or CWIP, I guess it got called in the Capitol this year. CWIP, it stands for Construction While in Progress. So previous to this year, Missouri had a law that utilities could not charge ratepayers, the customers, for construction while in progress. So if you built a coal plant, a nuclear plant, a gas plant, a solar farm, a battery storage unit, whatever, you had to build it using investor funds, and then you had to prove to the regulatory institution, the Public Service Commission, that that was necessary and prudent, and then you could be reimbursed through rates. Construction while in progress says you can increase rates to pay for construction. The reason Sierra Club is opposed to this is because a lot of CWIP has been used to fund extremely expensive infrastructure like nuclear plants, and the ratepayers do not see that return on investment. And a lot of times the money goes into never-ending projects that never end up being finalized or finished. And it reduces the risk for the utility, because if the project doesn't finally materialize or end up what they wanted it to be, then they haven't wasted investor money, right? But they have invested ratepayer money. So we were very concerned that this represented a transfer of wealth, money from struggling customers to the actual pockets of shareholders, CEOs, and other folks who are interested in the development of nuclear and other expensive projects. And that was just one part of this bill. Other parts of the bill included things like being able to, if they said that if we close down a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas plant or a nuclear plant, we have to replace it with the same amount of electricity or greater. Which my response to that when I was speaking and the hearing was, I have an 8-year-old. When she was born, I needed to have money in my budget for diapers and formula. But now my daughter is 8. I don't budget for diapers and formula anymore. This bill is actually codifying that we insist on having diapers and formula for the rest of my daughter's life. There is no sunset. And so that's really frustrating. We were incredibly lucky though, because we got thousands of people to make phone calls to their legislators, email, write in, attend hearings, attend lobby day, speak to their legislators. We sent thousands of texts. We had hundreds of emails sent. We had hundreds of phone calls sent in to targeted people in the House and Senate. And we were incredibly lucky to have Senator McCreery as a partner working against this in the Senate. And fortunately, because of Senator McCreery's actions, we were able to get a few things in Senate Bill 4 that make it less bad, but it is still not a great bill. So the things that we got included were things like create a special class of customers in the state of Missouri that represent low-income customers. So people who are struggling to pay their bills, let's make them a different class and treat them slightly differently than we would other ratepayers, like large commercial ratepayers. So for example, if Amazon wants to come to Missouri and build a giant data center, we should not be forcing low-income folks who are struggling to put food on their table to subsidize Amazon's expansion of industry. Instead, they should be covering that bill because they're the ones that are going to be using that electricity. She also included some things like increasing money for the Office of Public Counsel, which is our representative in regulatory hearings, that they really fight for the consumer. They fight for the people on the ground to say, you know, yes, raise a rate. We think that this is appropriate, or no, don't. People can't afford this and you really shouldn't be charging for it. They are incredibly underfunded, but very passionate people. And so we were able to increase their funding slightly. So those are really fantastic things. There was a lot of other things included in the bill, but I just want to point out that there was a massive undertaking of folks around the state in opposition to this. We had folks from environmental groups like Sierra Club, Missouri Coalition for the Environment, Renew Missouri, opposing this. But we also had folks from, for example, the Consumers Council, right? We had industry groups that were opposed to this. And the reason that this passed is because utilities pooled their money and resources. They had more than 7 dozen lobbyists in the Capitol, and they outspent and outtalked us because there was no way to compete with that. But the only reason that we got the protections in here that we did, and the amount of media that we did, was because people like you stood up and said that's unacceptable. So that was Senate Bill 4. We put a lot of time and energy in that, and we're very sad that that was a loss. But we know that we can't win everything. And I'm just really proud of the effort that went into that. And the conversations that we were able to have with legislators and people on the ground, and the relationships that we built with other organizations. Passing it back to you, Carrie.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gretchen. That was fantastic. And yes, huge shout out to senators like Senator Tracy McCreery, who's trying her hardest to protect us against legislation like this. But moving on to more bad news, unfortunately, we had another one that was passed that we weren't a fan of. This is SB 221. So this changes the way a state agency interprets statutes, rules, regulations, etc. So when a state agency interprets a law or regulation, like kind of like deciding on how a pollution permit would work, for example, courts often give some deference to agencies' interpretations, especially if the law is unclear. That said, this bill removes that type of deference. So it actually orders the courts or the administrative hearing officer, whoever, to interpret that meaning and the effect of the given statutes, rules, regulations, and consider all of that de novo, which essentially means from scratch. So instead of deferring to a state agency, so that it makes it harder for state agencies to enforce rules the way that they interpret them. So we see this as potentially very harmful. So that's another one. That's
Can I
more
add
bad
something
news.
to that, Carrie?
Please, yes.
I just want to say the reason that that bill is concerning is because state agencies like the Department of Natural Resources oversee our ability to implement like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. And so this bill is saying that the experts at Department of Natural Resources cannot interpret rules. Instead, the court is allowed to interpret statutes and rules. And if you have a judge that has, 2 lawyers in front of them, one a highly paid industry lawyer, the second, a lawyer, maybe an expert, but an environmental lawyer that doesn't have as many resources, that's very concerning to us. And while we acknowledge that a lot of these state agency positions are now becoming very political, we know that there are people in these agencies that have the training and the education and the knowledge to be able to interpret these statutes in a way that is meaningful and appropriate for our state. And courts don't necessarily have the ability to do that. So this could be extremely dangerous.
Precisely. Thank you. I couldn't have said it better. But moving on to some more good news, turning away from that bad news here. So these are bills that were blocked, that did not cross the finish line, that we were also not fans of. So I'll start off with that HB 939. I know we sent out an action alert. I know you're sick of us talking about it, but it very fortunately was not able to make it across that finish line. And this is the building codes bill that essentially rolls back building codes to their 2009 standard and imposes that statewide that code, essentially, because right now Missouri does not have a statewide code that says, hey, you need to be this or above or this or below, but this would essentially say, hey, you have to adopt 2009 standard, which kind of circumvents a lot of green energy building. So we weren't a fan of this at all, and luckily it died in well, I think it was on the Senate informal calendar. Another one a few other ones that we were very concerned by, HB 544 and SB 14. So these are those bear immunity bills. I know that you've heard about these as well, since we sent out many action alerts. But this is just a part of Bayer's state-by-state campaign to protect themselves from liability. So staff members from the Missouri chapter, we attended those public hearings, delivered testimony, visited with legislators to urge their opposition to these bills, as we did for HB 939 as well. SB 14 died in the Senate, and HB 544, while it passed the Senate committee, never actually made it onto the calendar. We might see these next year. Not entirely quite sure. But moving on to a few more that we were very opposed to, but didn't actually make it. HB 1137 and HB 1454. So these are the takeover of ONSER, which is Ozark National Scenic Riverway. It's our protected riverway here in Missouri. It protects the Jack Forks and the Current. So it's federally protected, not just by the state. It's over 130-ish miles of natural river and just recreation areas. And Missouri wants to basically take the federal oversight away from the federal government, and the state would oversee it. So luckily, those bills did not pass, just because that could be very detrimental to the ongoing environmental and conservation projects that are going on those currently happening on those rivers. But yes, those bills, they did receive a hearing, but they never made it onto the House floor. And then I'm going to pass it back again to Gretchen to quickly run through the anti-democracy and the crypto bills.
Sure. So I'm just going to give a high level overview here. So the Sierra Club knows that in order to change everything, we need everyone. We also know that those who are disenfranchised, or those who don't have access to voting, or who are actively discouraged from voting, are the folks that are most impacted by climate change and environmental racism. So we were really concerned to see the number of bills that were on the calendar this year that would do things like remove people from voting rolls, would reduce our ability to have an initiative petition process, which apparently a lot of folks here have been involved in the past. Thank you for that. And basically just do things to inhibit our ability to impact our democracy. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. This is an investment term. So you might have heard of like green investments. It's the idea that a organization or an investment firm can make decisions on where they invest their members' money based on environmental concerns, social concerns, or governance concerns. So, for example, if you said, I don't want to invest in anyone that has stolen ancient religious artifacts, so maybe we don't want to invest in Hobby Lobby, right? Then that would be a social issue. Or I don't want to invest with anyone who is opposed to trans rights, right? Those are social issues. Governance, though, it just means how a company is run. So if you say, I don't want to invest in companies that have had insider trading, that's ESG. And ultimately, these bills became not just anti-ESG bills, but they've also become ESG and DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Or they became highly targeted. So some of these bills said that if your company is engaging in any type of protest or any type of boycott, that you would not be allowed to, we wouldn't be allowed to invest Missouri money in that, or we wouldn't be able to work like with that company for our pensions or contracts for the state or things like that. This is an infringement of First Amendment rights and a real misunderstanding of what ESG and DEI are. And so I'd just like to give a shout out to our senators that stood up in hearings and educated their colleagues on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, why we have DEI policies, why we have ESG policies, and those that really stood up for our democracy. Fortunately, we didn't see any ESG or DEI bills passing. We did see Senate Bill 22, which was an attack on initiative petitions. But this was something that we followed and something that we know impacts our environment. And so we keep a close eye on it. We are also keeping a close eye on crypto bills. So folks are probably familiar with cryptocurrency. Our issue and concern with cryptocurrency is the amount of water and energy that it uses. The idea behind cryptocurrency is that you solve mathematical equations to create essentially a form of currency. And to put this in sort of perspective, cryptocurrency alone in the United States in 1 year uses the same energy as the country of Pakistan in 1 year. That's how much energy is being used, and it takes a lot of water to cool down these facilities. So we have been concerned about that and watching those, but fortunately we didn't see anything passing this year.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Gretchen. That kind of, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to bills that we hope to see next year. So these are bills that we supported but didn't make it across the finish line. The ones that are highlighted are bills that MCE actually helped write. So I just want to make sure that those were highlighted. I'm going to go over just a few of them very briefly. So HB 1208 and 1466. So those are two bills, like I said, that MCE staff helped write. And the legislation would essentially phase out AFFF. There's 3 Fs in there. It's a type of firefighting chemical. It contains PFAS, which is commonly known as forever chemicals, and it's just in very high concentrations. And those are very potent carcinogens. They're endocrine disruptors. They cause just a variety of health issues. So 13 other states have successfully phased out this AFFF and replaced it with alternative foams, which are just as effective. And the MCE just want you all to know that they are very excited to have this bill introduced by the only former firefighter in the legislature, Rep. Tim Taylor. And they also enjoyed that bipartisan sponsorship by Rep. Greg Bush, and who is a registered nurse. And this is critical because firefighters and military personnel are occupationally exposed to AFFF and subsequently have heightened blood PFAS levels and related illnesses. So these are 2 pieces of legislation that could be great forms of protection for them. Another one I want to highlight, or they would like for me to highlight, HB 569. So that is another bill that they helped write. It essentially establishes public oversight of the Clean Water Commission. And also bars individuals with significant financial ties to regulated industries from serving on the commission as members. So on its face, this bill would help us protect our most valuable resource. And then finally, a few bills that we're very excited about for next year are under the energy subsection there, is SB 386 and HB 662. So these bills establish a community solar pilot program here in Missouri. So these programs are exactly, thank you, Gretchen. These programs are local solar generation facilities. They're just shared by multiple community subscribers. It lessens the energy burden. And it's just a way for folks to get in on solar while not having to actually install those panels. And so these are all bills. It's a good visual representation of how many bills that we like and we support. And we hope that these bills see more action next year. And this next, I just want to go over just a quick special section, just a very quick recap. So for those that don't know, Governor Kehoe called a special session during his first year on his first term. And then here's just kind of what passed, just a very short breakdown of it. So the stadium funding bill, that was SB 3 for the extraordinary special session bills. It passed the disaster relief funding for over, it was 100 million passed. I think originally it was 550 million. House Bill 19 items. So for those that don't remember, House Bill 19 is an appropriations bill that deals with capital improvements And it failed over in the House, to the surprise of many Democrats and the just other state Democrats, Senate Democrats, and also House Democrats, and pretty much everyone that didn't understand why it wasn't being passed in the first place. So the total of that bill that passed during special session was around 360 million. And it included $5 million for an MU research reactor, and then also 13.2 million to the Department of Natural Resources and 20.6 million to the Department of Conservation. That's a very brief recap. There's more information out there. If you have any questions, please let us know. But for the sake of time, I'm going to continue on. So we have some trends that we saw this year. So that push for nuclear. So a handful of those pro-nuclear bills we saw this year. This matched around the level of my very preliminary research. It matched the level of legislation that we saw last year. But these 2 years kind of mark a high point. Mo now has more nuclear bills than we've ever seen before. And then solar and energy justice. Here's another trend. And it's so the first statewide pilot program was introduced in the legislature in 2022. Community solar bills have been introduced continued to be introduced in the following years. And then 3 bills in 2025 were introduced with more refined proposals and explicitly including equity provisions, which we like to see. And then another trend that we're seeing, so oversight and preemption. So lawmakers they're aiming to limit state agency authority, reduce appropriations, redefine oversight thresholds, kind of like what we're seeing with SB 221, if you remember us kind of going over that. So these measures, they risk decreasing environmental protections and just reducing public transparency in general. So those are just a few of the trends that we're seeing. I just wanted to make sure that we made note of them. But to continue on, legislative reflections. So as I said, we're very, very lucky today to have Senator Tracy McCreery here. She's been one of our biggest champions in the Capitol. And like I said, we're just so very lucky. So I'm going to pass it on to Senator McCreery.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to say, first of all, before I get going, I wouldn't be a state senator if it wasn't for all of the work that environmental activists like you did to help me get elected back in 2022. So I just want to say thank you to so many of you who made calls for me, sent postcards, door knock, that kind of thing. So thank you. It's been a great honor to be in the state Senate and stand up for just common sense issues. I don't consider environmental issues partisan or niche issues. The way I was raised and I continue to live my life is that, you just take care of the things around you, including the land and the air and the water and such. And I've carried that into my time in the state Senate. One of the things I wanted to reflect on, which is kind of interesting because we just had a reflection slide right before this, is so I've been in office. I was in the House for 9 years, and then I'm in my 3rd year in the state Senate. So I've got a little bit of time in the legislature. One of the things that I've been pleased about is we're starting to see the issues that all of us care about become less partisan. And I'm totally psyched about that. For the longest time, it seemed like it was only like the typical Democrats that cared about the land, the air, the water. In my time in the legislature, especially in this last 3-4 years, we're starting to see more and more legislators from the majority party start to see that environmental issues are not partisan. And so I feel really hopeful that moving forward, we're going to have more successes at the state level in holding off bad things, but also maybe being able to, like newsflash, maybe able to do something proactive and positive, which is kind of a big deal. I think you can probably tell when you talk to Gretchen and Carrie and myself, like we're often in this mode of defense, and it feels really good to finally be able to start to push for some positive things and be on the offensive. In the state Senate, there's a few Republican state senators who have had some pretty atrocious environmental things happen in their state Senate districts. And although I hate to see that happen, it has been very eye-opening for everybody. A lot of these rural state senators, their districts are often impoverished. There's not necessarily a lot of news coverage, attention being paid to what's happening in their counties. And because of that, some businesses and entities have tried to do things that were really harmful to neighbors and harmful to the environment. And it's just been a good positive step in that we're seeing a lot more partnership between Republicans and Democrats at standing up for people and saying, hey, we're not going to let these companies come in and pollute the oil, the land, the water, the air. We're just not going to let them do that. So I've been really pleased about that. This is one area, obviously as legislators, we cover all kinds of policy areas, but in the environmental movement, I really feel hopeful that things have gotten less partisan. So I think we need to look forward to next session when we can try to do even more things that are proactive. One of the things that I remain concerned about in the legislature is that there are some politicians that continue to want to and attempt to ignore the wishes of the people. So we have an interesting situation in the state of Missouri where Missouri voters vote overwhelmingly for issues I'll just like the last couple of issues. So back in November of 2024, 58% of Missouri voters voted to increase minimum wage and to allow workers to gradually earn a little paid sick time. We passed that. We also passed Amendment 3, which would ended Missouri's abortion ban. But then just as soon as the voters passed that, some politicians have attempted to undo the will of the people. And it's really, really frustrating to me on several levels. But it's alarming to me if in this state we're going to have politicians that sort of, so the voters were smart enough because they elected these politicians, but at the same time on the same ballot, they were smart when they voted for me, but then they were not smart when they voted to increase minimum wage. So we as voters, I think we should not give up. We should not let actions of some politicians discourage us from voting and from getting involved. I think that's part of the reason these things are done, quite honestly. So, I know there's a long time between now and when the elections come up in 2026, but we all need to sort of remember how we're feeling right now and kind of harness that energy. I was so glad to see in the chat, there's like a wide variety of people on the Zoom tonight that pretty much do, you name it, they're involved. We need to remember how we're feeling tonight and how we felt on May 14th when Republican politicians just decided to thumb their noses at the voters and say, hey, we think we know better than you voters. We need to remember how we feel because we've got a lot of work to do in the 2026 elections to be able to tell people that we're not going to let you just trample on us and tell us what you think is good or bad for us. Long term in the state Senate, there was a rare procedural move used on Wednesday, 2 days before session had to officially adjourn. It's a motion called moving the previous question. We don't need to get into the weeds on that. Basically, it's a motion that abruptly cuts off debate and it's not debatable. It has to pretty much immediately come to a vote. That happens, the PQ, cutting off debate, happens hundreds and hundreds of times every session in the Missouri House, but in the Senate, it's rarely used. The Senate is the slow, deliberative, more thoughtful body where how we work in Missouri anyway is we compromise, we work together, and we find a solution so that things can move forward. And unfortunately, the majority party was not willing to have open, honest, transparent discussions on Proposition A or Amendment 3. So everything was just abruptly cut off a couple of days before it needed to be cut off. So I remain disappointed about that. I'm concerned moving forward what that's going to mean for the state Senate. I think, one of the things that has been helpful to Missouri's environment is the fact that we have a standing filibuster in the state of Missouri. That means for people like us that care about the environment, if you just have 1, 2, 3 senators that are passionate and have the physical ability to stand up and talk, we've been able to stop really bad things. My concern is if this abruptly cutting off debate and moving things to vote, if that starts to become a trend in the Senate, that's going to be really problematic for, groups like ours, where we just are looking out for the long-term health of the state. So I'm going to do everything I can between now and, when we get together back in again in January, to try to figure out some kind of path to move forward. But, Missouri, Missouri really needs the Senate to be able to be that safety net, that wall between, some pretty extreme policies, just like being like sprinted across the finish line. So if any of you live in areas where you have Republican state senators, I encourage you to, try to reach out to those senators during the interim and just encourage them to try to find a path forward so that the Senate can continue to function as the Senate. I don't think it's good for anyone in the state of Missouri if the Missouri State Senate just becomes like the Missouri House. That it's I don't see that ending in a good way. This year, the state budget was close to $50 billion with the B, 50 with the B. Moving forward, these coming up during the next fiscal year, we're going to see a dramatic decrease in the amount of money available to fund the state budget. That's going to obviously impact a lot of the things that we care about. So we're already going to need to be gearing up to ready to be active during next session when it comes to standing up for making sure that Department of Natural Resources is funded adequately. Luckily with Department of Conservation, a lot of their funding is locked in because of that sales tax, but we still need to always be keeping our eyes out for, budget cuts and cuts in staff and that kind of thing. I just want to say that I appreciate everything that all of you are doing. A lot of the issues that we care about, they kind of intersect with a lot of other issues. So even like there was an education bill that passed that had a big win for us. It had get the lead out of the Drinking Water Act. So that was in an education bill. And that's one of the neat things about my job is that we have wins kind of tucked in a lot of different bills. So thanks to the work of the Sierra Club and the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, we do have a lot of good things that are happening in other pieces of legislation as well. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for everything that you're doing to make sure that Gretchen and her team can be present in the state capitol. It's so helpful. It feels a lot like a classic David versus Goliath battle, but I don't want anyone to feel discouraged. I'm not. I'm often in the numbers. I might be in the minority, but together we represent, what the vast majority of Missourians want, and it cuts across party lines. Missourians want their kids, their loved ones to have access to clean water, clean air, and soil that can produce great food, nutritious food, but also the kind of soil where your kids can get out and dig around and not worry about, being getting some disease down the road. So we just know that we're on the right side on this. And if we don't give up, if we continue to stand up and make our voices heard, we're going to be able to hold back some really bad things.
Thank you so much, Senator McCreery. I just want to celebrate you for a moment. As someone who has worked with a lot of legislators and has known Senator McCreery since she was in the representative, there are very few advocates in Jefferson City that are her equal. And I just really appreciate your passion, your advocacy, your willingness to listen to people, and your ability to very calmly walk into a room and tell everybody that they're wrong in a very kind and respectful way. And still come to some sort of resolution of the conflict. It's such an important skill.
One other thing I want to say too is don't underestimate. So my staff is just as important in this whole process as I am. So my staff, Hannah Dolan and Emily O'Loughlin, they make me look like I'm not an environmentalist. These people are so into preserving Missouri and keeping Missouri as amazing as it is. So when you're reaching out by phone, don't ever neglect the staff because they have such a big influence on me. And we're a part of a team. And so when you're working with state reps and state senators, make sure their staff knows what's going on as well, because often they are the most influential person in the legislator's life.
That is so amazing. And I want to double that for Emily and Hannah. They're so helpful, and just so kind and so smart. You're lucky to have them. On that note, for folks that want to make an impact in Jefferson City and they're not necessarily talking to someone maybe who's as enlightened as you or who knows as much as you do now about the environment, what would you recommend for how to reach out to them and how to talk to them?
Well, that's a really good question. And you could probably pick up from the slides, you can tell that legislators are now home back in their districts between now and January, basically. You know, you'll have to, sometimes we pop back and forth to Jeff City for a hearing or whatever, but generally between now and early January, elected officials are back home in their home districts. So now is a really good time to try to reach out to them if you want to have a face-to-face meeting. It would be very normal to reach out to them and say, hey, can we meet at the coffee shop on the town square? And I just want to talk to you a little bit, you know, and say how much time you want, be respectful of the time. But this is a good, these next 6 months are a good time to reach out to your elected official. Also, I might sound old school, but I like when I'm in my office, the first thing I look at are notes that are like handwritten notes. Maybe the envelope is, you know, like pink and it's handwritten. I'm like, oh, nobody sends a handwritten note anymore. That's always the first thing I look at. So if you're trying to have your message stand out, you know, try some of those techniques just to get your message to stand out differently. And then, you know, just what you need to do is not be afraid to talk to your neighbors anymore about issues that are important. No, I don't think any longer we should feel like that we're marginalized or pigeonholed on environmental issues. These are, you know, we, you don't have to, all you have to do is look outside and see it's like, you know, in the mid to high 90s and it's still June. You know, we don't have to get into a debate over what has caused climate change, but it's happening. And so don't be afraid to talk to your neighbors and get them to just think about the connections between elected officials and politicians and how their actions or their inaction has led us to some of these crises that we're in.
Any other advice or words of wisdom that you would like to share with advocates? I love this. It's, you know, basically don't be discouraged, keep showing up, share your story, try to find middle ground where you can, try to find, you know, some sort of like shared interest
Mhm.
or value. But mostly just show up, right?
Yeah, show up, whatever that looks like, and vary it a little bit. You know, also if you're anxious about, like, maybe if you're new to making phone calls to an elected official, don't call between 9 and 5. Call and leave a message at 7 at night when no one's there, and it kind of helps you get your confidence up a little bit with leaving a message. The other thing is, like, I follow a lot of groups. I get a lot of emails from groups across every issue. When organizations give you a template for an email to send, try to personalize it a little bit. So I love it, like Sierra Club gives you a template, but add an introductory paragraph. Say, hey, I met you at the 4th of July parade last year. You know, I hope all is well with you and your family. Just take that template of an email and personalize it a little bit. It will help it stand out in the email inbox.
Amazing. Does anyone else have questions for Senator McCreery before we let her get back to her day?
Yes, Gretchen, I do. Um, I'd like to ask about the Respect Missouri Voters Coalition effort that is developing now. I understand that they are working on uh, different versions of a petition to prevent the legislature from overturning initiative petitions that have been approved. And one of the versions involves a commission, similar to what they've done in Michigan, which would include uh, uh, randomly selected individuals from voter rolls who would be reviewed to then be placed on a commission to review ballot language for fairness and accuracy. Do you think that that kind of adding a commission like that to the ballot measure would impede it at the ballot, or do you think that it would find a lot of support?
That's a great question. And like you, Ross, I cannot wait to see some of the proposed language for that initiative. I do think that we need to do something. You know, it's not a recent problem in the state of Missouri that politicians have repeatedly undone undone the wish and the will of the people on issues. I do want to just make sure, though, that we're having experts look at these things to make sure that what we're trying to do with that doesn't have some kind of accidental negative impact as well. So I just would want to make sure that experts that know what they're doing as it relates to this, that it doesn't have any unintended consequences. But I'm with you, Ross. I would love to see something happen. I think that the voters would. I think the voters are feeling really frustrated right now, and that initiative petition, I think, would encounter big support when they're out collecting signatures.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Senator McCreery. We will definitely see you before we head back in January, but I just want to again say thank you for your advocacy and the work that you do in the Capitol. Yeah, to your amazing team. Y'all are a powerhouse. Go ahead, Carrie.
Excellent. I'm just going to quickly echo everything that Gretchen just said. Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to spend some time with us and chat with us and answer questions. Cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. All righty. Well, I'm going to share my screen. We got a few more slides for you, but not too many more. All righty. This on. So looking ahead, so this looks like just next year, next session. So what we're gonna try, oh, my bad. Did not mean to do that. Go back a few more. There you go. So what we're going to focus on is monitoring those trends. So the ones that we just spoke about, nuclear, solar, energy justice, but also the energy infrastructure push. A lot of that looks like SB4. So there might be a few groups that want to continue pushing or adding some more legislation onto SB4, making it easier for, or even folks that want to put some more, like senators like Tracy McCreery, want to put some more consumer protections in place for people. So looking at just monitoring those trends, solar growth, like I said, those community solar bills, they did receive some hearings this year, which is super exciting. And there are just some other projects that are happening in Missouri that are pro-solar and more groups that are pro-solar. So just monitoring that. Regulatory rollbacks and those preemption battles, of course. And I spoke a little bit on that. It kind of came in the form of SB 221 that passed, but there are just a handful of other bills that are trying to take away power from agencies and from groups like the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. So just monitoring trends is something that we will continue to do. And if you are at all interested, that's something that we suggest as well. This kind of goes hand in hand in that second point here, proactive legislation and upcoming events. So taking a look at pre-filed legislation. So legislators begin pre-filing December 1st. So that'll happen December 1st, 2025. And a lot of them are bills that they'll bring back, but there are also new ones. So just making sure that you're getting through those. And if you are at all interested, watching to see what trends that they're following. And advocating for those equity-focused and clean energy policy, of course. That kind of looks like reaching out to your senators, which I'll get a little bit more into that and making an impact. And then we also have a few spaces that you can join to talk with like-minded people, kind of just like this meeting. So MOS is something that we have. It's a Missouri, the says Mo Sierra Space. And that is happening this week, actually, at 7 p.m. It is a virtual call as well. The link is there for folks to sign up, but it can also just be found on our website if you just Google Moss Sierra Space MO chapter. So yep, that's on the 25th of this month. So just in a few days. And then MCE, they have something called Chats for Change. So there are, I believe 3 more events that are happening in Kansas City, St. Louis, and Springfield. And those can be found on the website just underneath the 3 cities that I placed on the screen here. And it can also be found just on their website if you Google MCE Chats for Change. So that's just another great space. It's kind of like Moss. It's where like-minded people can come. We can talk about legislation next year and next steps and just to meet other members. They're just 2 great spaces. So just want to make sure that I'm elevating those. And then finally, the third part of looking ahead, making an impact. But before I get into making impact, I just want to make sure that I'm taking the time and just making space to truly thank our committed members, our volunteers, those that are on the call tonight, ally organizations, of course, that make making an impact possible in the legislative realm. So I see a few folks that are on here, such as I think Peter Schneeberger's on here. I believe John is as well, John Madras. I want to call you out by name. Carolyn Bufault, I know as well. Michael Berg, just want to make sure that we thank him as well. And Francis Clark and Carolyn Ampran. So just some folks that I believe that are on this call, just to say thank you so much. Ross Hunt as well. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and for answering our texts. You know, when we're sitting in a hearing, it's like, hey, what does this provision mean? Just a really quick answer. So thank you all so much for all of your help. And then also those ally organizations, of course, want to make sure I shout out MCE. They were here. We partnered with them throughout session, partnered with them for this event, of course. Renew Mo is another one. The Consumers Council, of course. How could we forget USGBC and the AIA and just many other organizations that we've worked with over the past few months during session. Just really want to thank you, and making an impact is possible with you all. But yeah, kind of delving deeper into making that impact. So action alerts, we send those out quite often. And adding a personal note, this is something that the senator even touched on. So making sure that we're adding those personal notes is something that's super eye-catching. Reaching out directly to your legislators without an action alert, of course. Their contact information can be found on their webpage just through the state. And then interim actions, so meetings and hearings that are coming up. I don't have any dates that are on there now, but things are always happening, such as the Spire rate case that just happened throughout the state of Missouri. They held different hearings, but things like that are going on. And we'll be sure to let members know about them, but I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that during Make an Impact. And legislative committee. So this is a volunteer group that is with the Sierra Club, made of volunteers, many of the ones that I actually just mentioned. And you're absolutely just critical to our legislative impact here with the Sierra Club. So if you're at all interested, we will be kind of reorging it just a little bit now that because I'll be overseeing it. So if you have any questions about it, if you are at all interested, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And then also making sure that we're talking in our circles. So, you know, if we're out with friends, just if you want to just mention like, hey, this is going on, it's something I really care about, I think you should pay attention to. I find that is incredibly effective. And Gretchen, maybe you can share some more thoughts on that. But yeah, that's kind of what making an impact looks like. And I just want to make sure that we save the space in this conversation tonight to really focus on it.
Yeah, I saw an article today that said why white people talking to your Black friends is helpful when talking about racism. And I feel that talking to folks that you don't necessarily think are like fellow tree huggers about environmental issues is incredibly important. It's important to find those things that you share in common and to talk to people. We are very easily misled or triangulated against each other or sort of put into silos if we aren't speaking to each other. And we need to understand how our issues impact each other. And I think that one of the most powerful things that you can do is to go to your, ancient knife welding club on Wednesdays, or your D&D campaign, or your Bible study, or your local community meeting, or your neighborhood association meeting, and just say, hey, this is something that's going to impact our community, and I want you to know about it. Not to try to start a fight, not to try to get people onto our side, but just to raise awareness of these are issues that are happening. I'm happy to talk to you about it. And when you're able to have those conversations with people without it going into talking points or, right versus left, I find that those conversations are very successful in helping to change hearts and minds. This year, our lobbyist and I sat down and had more conversations with Republicans than we ever had in a year. And I was able to find something that I agreed with those Republicans with in every single meeting. We were able to come to some agreement on something, right? And even if it's just that the sky is blue outside, right? But at least we're starting somewhere, and we're seeing each other as human beings, not political figures. So yeah, that's my call to you, is talk to somebody, share, be a steward, and share what you're interested in. I really respect a lot of the folks on this call who I see doing that. Stan is a great example of somebody who's involved in a lot of things and is sharing information in the chat, is at our lobby days, is always in the Capitol. And not everybody is able to be as present like that, but where you are able to step in and share your personal experiences, it's incredibly helpful. And those of us in St. Louis and Springfield who saw tornadoes come through our neighborhoods and communities earlier this year have really seen the power of what people who come together can do. And I would love to see us do more of that in our state, because as I have said before, and I will say again, it's not easy being green in Missouri.
Yeah, that it isn't. Thank you so much, Gretchen. We're down to our last two slides. I know that we're a little over 7 p.m., so this is good timing. But parting thoughts. So please stay in touch. So follow us on socials. I have the Sierra Clubs here. There's our handle, and also MCEs, which is at Mo Environment. So making sure that we're following us there, because we'll share just key updates, different events that you can attend, much like the Chats for Change and also our Moss Sierra space. And then sign up for our newsletter. So that's another great way to keep updated on what we're doing. We have our link tree here. And then, of course, filling out that volunteer interest form if you have any interest in any of our other volunteer groups, if you want to learn more about LegCom. And then also want to shout out the chapter director office hours on Fridays. There is a sign up for that as well, which can be found on our website. I can send it out via email as well. I wish that that was an oversight. I should have shared it on the slide here, but I'm just realizing that typo. Yeah, Gretchen is very kind to share a part of her afternoon on Fridays with us. And you're welcome to hop on and chat with her about anything that's going on. If you have any questions about Mo Sierra Club, etc. But that is our second to last slide. But does anyone have any questions for us? Let me check there it is. Thank you, Gretchen, for sharing it in the chat. I'm checking here the chat to make sure no one sends any questions in. That sounds good. Well, I'm not really hearing many questions, but thank you all so very much. I know we are a little bit over 7 p.m., but thank you again.